Hi there, marketing researchers. We are Team P from Dr. Baker's marketing research class at San Diego State. My name's Kimberly Beam. The rest of my team is Vin Duong, Sophia Franco, and Leah Vargas. We conducted our research study on gluten-free product labeling. Our motivation for choosing gluten-free product labeling is simply for the fact that there are various trendy diets that have gained mass popularity amongst the community of health and weight-conscious consumers, only for the fad to die eventually. According to the Gluten-Free Agency, 55% of consumers spend 30% or more of their grocery budget buying gluten-free foods. However, only 4 million of the total 40 million consumers in the gluten-free market suffer from a medical condition that prohibits them from eating foods that contain gluten. The gluten-free market is growing rapidly due to gluten-intolerant consumers and those who are non-gluten sensitive but consider themselves health conscious. Changes in purchasing habits may pose as a benefit for companies to place gluten-free labeling on products that don't contain gluten organically. With this being said, we wanted to study if the presence of a gluten-free label affected the consumer's perceived value for a product, even though it is already naturally gluten-free. In the secondary research we conducted, there were previous studies that met some of the similar criteria we had for our study. First, a study done by Dr. Kevin Whelan concluded that in 20 out of 30 stores, gluten-free labeled items were more expensive than their counterparts without the label. Also, 2 studies, not involving gluten, were on the effect of nutritional labels on packaging. These studies both concluded that products with specific labels are sold at a premium and have a higher perceived value. Also, labeled products result in consumers having a positive perception for gluten-free labeling. So, people are more inclined to purchase something that sounds healthier versus the same product that doesn't have a positive spin put on the packaging. Products with food labels are often perceived as more valuable. We are going to move on to what our study is based around, which is the research question you see on the screen. Do gluten-free labels increase consumers' perceived value of naturally gluten-free food products? Our research objectives were a further development of our research question. Our objectives were to determine the difference in perceived value between naturally gluten-free products with and without gluten-free labels, to determine what demographic purchasing habits are most influenced by gluten-free labels, and to determine if manufacturers benefit more from having a gluten-free label on their products compared to not having a label.
I'm Sophia, and now we are going to discuss our research design.
We are going to walk you through the design of our survey, the majority being the experiments given to each of our respondents 4 times. We also followed up with questions discussing subjective opinions on their health consciousness, nutrition labeling in general, and where they shopped. We also asked a list of demographic questions to get a better sense of who our respondents were. The premise of our study was to see if gluten-free labels increase consumers' perceived value of a product. The experiment used images of naturally gluten-free products, one with the gluten-free label and one without. The products we used were corn tortillas, rice, quinoa, and oatmeal. We conducted 4 A/B experiments in our survey, which means each respondent received a randomized image version for each of the 4 products. Since perceived value was the main part of our research question, the way we measured that in our experiment was having our respondents give a price based on the image they saw. The second part of each A/B experiment was to see if the respondent was likely to purchase the product. This was conducted using a 5-point scale ranging from extremely unlikely to extremely likely. After the A/B experiments were completed, we had a list of questions for our respondents to follow to get their opinions on if they considered themselves health conscious. We also asked them questions about nutrition labeling and what they generally looked for on products when shopping. We asked where they shopped at as well. At the end, we also asked a series of demographic questions in order to get a better sense of who was responding to our study. After we created a survey in Qualtrics, we posted the survey on Facebook and sent it out in emails. This is a table of our sample validation summary. It is a breakdown of our initial sample we gathered, and it reflects how we cleaned the data and why certain responses were excluded. Our initial sample gathered was 139 responses. From that initial sample, we did a variety of exercises to clean the data. Of those initial responses, the total number that was excluded was 17. This was due to 1 respondent who did not go past the introduction, 10 who failed to complete the study to the satisfaction of the questions, and 6 who failed the minimum 2-minute requirement to complete the study. So our final sample retained for analysis was 122 responses. In this table, the demographic characteristics of our analyzed sample of 122 responses is displayed. It is sectioned into gender, age, and income. For gender, we had an overwhelming majority of our respondents indicate they were female at 78.5%. In the age section, the majority of our respondents indicated they were in the 18 to 25 age range at 34.4%, followed by the age range of 56 to 65 at 18%. In the income section, the majority of our respondents indicated they were in the bracket of $30,001 to $50,000 at 20.8%.
This income bracket seems indicative of the age range of 18 to 25 of college students and new professionals that are just starting off in their careers.
These percentages were again out of the 122 total responses.
And here is Leah to discuss our key results.
The research design section, including the last two tables of the summary statistics that were discussed, gave an idea as to how we conducted our study, how we cleaned our data, and a breakdown of the demographics of who our respondents were. We are now going to discuss our key results and explain the graphs we built from them. These graphs directly answer our research question, which is, do gluten-free labels increase consumers' perceived value of naturally gluten-free food products? In this graph, we see the average spending on products depending on if the respondent saw the image with no gluten-free label or with the gluten-free label. As you can see, there's a slight increase in the price for products with the label for rice, quinoa, and oatmeal. For tortillas, on average, respondents price tortillas without the label higher than with the label. While there is a slight difference between the two tests per product, the data was not statistically significant for us to conclude that there was a difference in the means. This graph illustrates the average likeliness to purchase products that were randomly shown in the experiments with respondents either seeing a product without a gluten-free label or with a label. This graph reflects the average of answers for the second part of each of the A/B experiments we included in our study. We wanted to determine if this product was something our respondents would likely buy to see how it measured up to the perceived value they awarded the product in the form of price. It shows that with tortillas and with oatmeal, our respondents were more likely to say they would purchase if they hadn't seen the gluten-free label, while the opposite is true for rice and quinoa, where the average likeliness is higher with respondents that did see the gluten-free label, although the difference isn't that large with rice and quinoa, with only 0.02 separating them. From our results, we can conclude that even though the findings for the independent sample t-test were not statistically significant, there was a slight increase in the perceived value for rice, quinoa, and oatmeal. We also ran a series of other tests that involved the demographics of our respondents. Even though we only tested product 1, we concluded that respondents ages 18 to 35 had a positive relationship with product spending for that product. Another conclusion made is that females did not have a relationship with product spending for product 1. This was an unexpected result due to a majority of respondents being female. Overall, this slight increase in perceived value demonstrates that respondents did perceive the products with the label higher, but due to our small sample size, our test resulted in values that were not statistically significant. Based off of the graph 2 slides prior, based on average spending per product, 3 out of the 4 products ranked higher in perceived value when they were given an image with the gluten-free label. One future recommendation would be that companies should continue to add gluten-free labels to their naturally gluten-free products, as our findings illustrated that consumers' perceived value is higher with products that have a gluten-free label visible. In addition, many respondents indicated that they were likely to buy these products after they specified a price. It would also be beneficial to companies to target the demographic market of 18 to 35-year-old people, and as we discuss in the next section, to conduct further experiments to determine how demographic variables relate to product spending. Now we will discuss our survey limitations. We had a small sample size due to people we sent the survey to not responding to our survey or not completing the survey. While the cases we had to eliminate were limited, a larger sample size would have provided us with more reliable data. We were also limited to convenience sampling by sending the survey to friends, family, coworkers, and peers only. This led us to having a limited population. In regards to one of our survey questions that was on a 5-point scale, with 5 being strongly agree and 1 being strongly disagree, we asked how much do you agree or disagree with the following statement: I consider myself to be health conscious. This question may result in skewed data because the definition of health consciousness is subjective. Lastly, there is a wide variation in the perceived value per product. Depending on the person and where they shop, the perceived value can vary because of the different opinions on the product and prices. In regards to future steps, one could be to conduct our experiment again and adjust for these limitations. This would be done by expanding the population and increasing the sample size. An additional future step would also be to conduct a follow-up experiment using products that naturally contain gluten. It would allow for a different view of the gluten-free labeling on products that naturally have gluten and have existing alternatives that have removed it. This would be used to see how it measures up to our experiment. The experiment could use our data to compare and determine if there is a difference in how people perceive the value of the product. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video. We hope you enjoyed learning about our gluten-free label study, the results we obtained, and how this will most likely continue to be a trend in the market.